Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen Berserker Rages, Bickering Brothers, and Mechanical Grizzly Bears. But we're going to kick things off this week with Absolute Flash number 2, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by Nick Robles. For a book titled Flash, this is a frustratingly slow burn, as this issue picks up off the heels of our premiere issue, which also didn't deliver a lot in regards of like plot movement. We know our character Wally West, and we've kind of been introduced to some of the greater characters that we're going to know from the Flash hierarchy, but there's not a lot that's really going on here. We don't really necessarily know why we're following this character. We don't necessarily know what the mission statement of this book is. And issue 2 doesn't really deliver a lot in the ways of that kind of thing happening as well. We get very little character development. We kind of understand the power set that the Flash has or is kind of experiencing for the first time. We see some of the changes, maybe some of the nuance that how that's being conveyed in the absolute universe as opposed to the DC proper universe, but nothing is really moving any of the character relationships or characters forward. And in the same vein, nothing is necessarily pushing the plot forward because the plot kind of doesn't exist yet. We don't really know what's happening. All we know is like the greater machinations of how Wally got these powers. That's all we kind of get. The artwork in here is good. However, I feel like the colors are so much of a letdown here, as everything is kind of just conveyed through the warm tones of the Flash's costume and the Flash's power set. So you get a lot of really bright, vibrant reds and yellows, but there's no contrast. It is all just kind of like red from top to bottom, and it makes it so uninteresting to the eyes that when you couple that with the fact that the story hasn't really given you much of anything, Absolute Flash is just feeling kind of like a dud to me. All right, let's talk Daredevil Unleash Hell number 4, written by Erica Schultz with artwork by Valentina Pinti. So this is the red band version of this book, and kind of many of the criticisms that we have with most red band books is that it is not red band whatsoever. This stays firmly within the bounds of that kind of mentality, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. What you see is what you get. It's more of a money grab thing for Marvel than anything, but I'm not going to put that on the creative team. What I can say is that the storyline in this, which really revolves around the character of Muse taking on basically another persona and kind of like drawing them into his machinations and making them kind of like the new version of Muse. There's a lot of interesting things that are being played with that they didn't really explore in previous issues, kind of like the restrictive nature of art and compromise and sacrifice when it comes to the creation of artwork. I think there's a really kind of cool commentary if you look at it under the right kind of like lens, I guess, of what it could be like working for a big two comic book company as opposed to maybe working on your own property, and how those two things don't necessarily always align. So there's some cool stuff that's being played with. Overall, the storyline of this very much feels like it's almost like a level setting here for Elektra. It feels, and I hope this isn't the case, but it feels like they're trying to basically unwind the character progression that we've gotten with Elektra as she's taken on the mantle of Daredevil. And it feels like maybe they're trying to kind of bring her back into the place where she was previously as a hired assassin, as basically an uncaring killer. I don't know if that's going to be how it turns out. Maybe this could be a pull the rug out, from underneath you type of moment where it sets you up for that, only to see her kind of carry on that heroic moniker. Time will tell on that. It's kind of I don't know. It's a dicey proposition here. I'm curious to see where they take it here. The storyline it's okay. This is a very middle of the road kind of book here, but I think they're exploring some kind of ideas that make it worthwhile to check it out. Next up, we have Detective Comics 1096, written by Tom Taylor with artwork by Mikkel Hanin. So this is going to wrap up the first arc of Tom Taylor's time on Detective Comics, and I feel like it was mostly effective. This particular issue, though, has definitely started to see some of the constraints of a monthly comic book schedule, as Mikkel Hanin didn't have it wasn't working solely as the only art creator on this book, as the first half of the pages were actually inked by a different person, and it definitely shows. The artistic quality does take a dip on those pages here. We start to get the latter half of the book, and we start to kind of see the person that we saw in the first parts of this arc, which were really fantastic, really great artwork. But again, we're talking about monthly books, and that's a real kind of grind. So I can understand why you would have to bring in another inker just to make sure that you're hitting those deadlines. Tom Taylor has a writing style that is very idyllic and very, I don't know, morally composed, right? He has like a rose tinted like view of the world and what the world looks like in the books that he's writing. And that definitely comes through here as Bruce has to make some decisions that, it would really make any individual question what kind of direction that they would go. But Bruce definitely takes the moral high ground. He is not going to be let his morals become questioned based on what's being put in front of him. And I do appreciate that, but I feel like it's such an easy way that they explore that to where it was unquestioned as opposed to any kind of like moral back and forth on it. So there was room where you could have played with some cool gray area, and they didn't necessarily do that. Overall, though, I must say, I feel like the first arc has been pretty darn effective. They played a lot with the past here, which is okay. I kind of like when they do that, but it played with the past in a way that isn't necessarily going to have a large effect on the future. You can see that this could have so easily be brushed aside and never like looked back towards. And it would be, no one would be any the wiser. So was it worthwhile to play with such big things from Batman's past if it's not going to have any ramifications? I don't know. Time will tell on that. Overall, though, if you're just looking at this in a vacuum, I feel like it was a really effective story. All right, with the continuation of the silent issues, let's talk G.I. Joe Real American Hero, The Spirit Special #1, written and drawn by Leonardo Romero. These have been so much fun. I really, really enjoyed the Jinx storyline here, and the Spirit feels like falls right in line with that same tradition, as they're kind of really honoring that GI Joe issue #21, the Snake Eye silent issue, and it's done so well. Leonardo Romero was previously the artist that was on the Birds of Prey, and they kind of like follow that same artistic quality right through with this, as we get to see the character of Spirit as they're kind of like hunting down animals for not hunting purposes, but to track them and try to, heal those that are maybe wounded or something like that. And they're kind of investigating because something is in the woods that is causing damage, and they need to basically track down what it is that's doing this. And they come upon a cobra compound where there's a mechanical grizzly bear that's like just wreaking havoc all over the place. Really great pacing in this book. The only thing that really let it down for me is that the Jinx special had such a great framing device, the ticking clock down, 20, 19, 18. And this didn't necessarily have that same framing device. It was really a day in the life, the adventures of Spirit. And it works. It just doesn't necessarily work as effectively without the words as that previous special did. Overall, though, really fantastic. I really love that they're doing this and letting the artists shine and take the front stage here as the storytellers. It totally works out, and I think it's absolutely something that you should check out. Next up, we have Iron Man #7, written by Spencer Ackerman with artwork by Julius Otto. We've gotten a couple issues now where I feel like we're building some momentum. We're getting kind of like a good pace going, and I'm really happy for that, specifically for the character of Iron Man, as I feel like it's become like almost the tropiest of tropey characters, where we kind of just go over the same grounds over and over and over. Tony loses his business. Tony struggles with alcoholism. Tony loses his suits. Rinse and repeat. We're finally dealing with some new kind of bold things here, and it's all under the kind of the umbrella of the one world under Doom. And they're playing with that idea probably more effectively than any other book in Marvel right now, as Tony is trying to basically fight the battle against Doom on a totally different front than anyone else here. Everything else seems very comic booky and very, good guys fight bad guys centric, where Tony is definitely looking at this from the perspective of a war, and he's looking at it from the perspective of the Latvarians, right, and their perception of their leader, not just the true Latvarians, but now the greater globe of the people that are kind of like following along with Doom's ideals and the things that he's putting forth. So Tony's working with a lot of different places and people trying to basically start making the greater populace question Doom's motivations and maybe kind of like employ some tactics that are going to get him to slip up and show maybe what his true end game is going to be. I really like that they're leaning into those ideas, and it's not just about punching back and forth. That's some really cool stuff that they're playing with, and I think that's one of the strengths and one of the things I wanted to see from Spencer as a writer, given his background as a war journalist. We're starting to get that here. The artwork is getting better and better with each issue, as well as I feel like we've kind of like fallen into a really good place with what they're doing here. My only gripe with the issue is that they definitely try to shoehorn a couple things in from the West Coast Avengers book, which I enjoy the continuity. But in that same vein, it felt so kind of like hokey and cheesy to like really just like swing that detail in when it wasn't necessarily needed, and it didn't do anything to further this individual issue itself. But in regard to Marvel books, I'm pleasantly surprised to say that Iron Man might be kind of gaining steam and becoming one of the better ones amongst the bunch. All right, let's talk Redcoat number 11, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Brian Hitch. So we're finally outside of the adventure of the week kind of thing, as we've gotten that from the last previous 3 or 4 issues, and now it feels like we're really kicking off into the next proper arc of this book, as we're introduced to the Northerner, and his presence is kind of made within the unnamed universe, and it's made pretty darn heavily as you see the ramifications that Simon is having to deal with right now. They're in the landscape of the Civil War, and basically Simon, being Simon, is kind of playing, he's walking that razor thin line right between, the North and the South here, and he's not choosing sides. He's going where the money leads him, which is definitely Simon pure, you know, his characteristics to a T. But the Northerner calls that into question, as there's definitely things now, as we're playing with the aspect of time and immortality, and we see the effects that that's having on Simon Pure, the character. On top of that, his immortality is tied to the notion of the nation of America. So now, when that's called into question, when there are things that are happening due to time travel that maybe question whether America can or should exist, well, that calls into question his immortality. So they're really playing with some cool ideas here, and it's forcing this uneasy alliance between the Northerner and Redcoat himself. Brian Hitch continues to put together like some really fantastic artwork here. I mean, every issue has been like him putting forth like some of like career best work, in my personal opinion. I really love what he's doing here. Jeff Johns is crafting a really enthralling story. It continues to be my favorite book or series from the Unnamed Universe. This issue just strengthens that argument for me more so and more so. We have a double dose of Wolverine, but we're going to kick things off with Ultimate Wolverine number 4, written by Chris Condon with artwork by Alessandro Cappuccio. This has heavy, heavy tones and values and like I don't know, memories that are like seeped in the Weapon X storyline by Barry Windsor Smith, and this very much feels like the Ultimate Universe version of that same storyline. Albeit we're not taking place with Professor Cornelius like we did in the 616. This is solely within Russia, within the manipulations that are taking place here to turn Logan into the Weapon X Winter Soldier version that we've kind of known from these past couple issues. They really lean into the ideas of that Weapon X storyline, though, as I feel like they're trying to emulate kind of the same tones and the same feelings as the scientists did in that 616 proper storyline. As there's some that are questioning their tactics and motives, some are questioning the safety of themselves as they're trying to go through these trials of really manipulating Logan and control him through a lot of different means. And I think for the most part, it was really done effectively. We kind of use the imagery also of the Weapon X storyline here with the wolf and the bear, the fight that those two go through, the berserker rage that we get from the character of Logan as he's trying his best to fight, the mind control that he's going through, and kind of remain the character that he is, but struggling and not being able to kind of hold that. And he gets, more in tune with his animalistic self. The gripe I have with this issue is that while I like the narrative and storyline and kind of the emulation that we have, the colors of this issue get really, really muddy, and it gets kind of hard to convey the same emotions and feelings that you would want from the bright and vibrant work that we got from Barry Windsor Smith in this same book here. They get very one note, very muddy. It's very dark colors and very cool colors, like just kind of like sloshed around every single page. And I don't think it does as much as it could for the book if there was some kind of like pop of, I don't know, something. It needed something in regard to the color work itself. When it comes to the story, though, I really like what Chris Condon is doing. I think that there's a real love for the character, a real love for the history of the character in the 616 proper, and they're carrying that over and making it new and interesting for this new Ultimate universe. So I have to say, as far as Ultimate books, so far, this has been extraordinarily effective. Staying in line with Wolverine, we're going to talk Wolverine number 8 or Legacy number 400, written by Saladin Ahmed with artwork by Martin Cuccolo. So I picked this issue back up as I had previously dropped Wolverine's solo title a while back. And I really got this because it's a milestone issue. I wanted to see what they do, but I primarily wanted to see this from the backup issue, written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson. We're going to get to that in a second, but we're going to start with Saladin Ahmed's two actual storylines, which puts a bow on kind of like the first arc that he's been putting forward in Wolverine, which kind of dealt with a lot of villains from Wolverine's past, primarily the ones that also use adamantium in one way or another, and how they're being manipulated by this being known as the adamantine, which kind of possesses them and sees people who use the metal kind of as almost like a blasphemous thing. You know, he's like a godly creature who looks down upon the users of it. It was okay. It didn't do anything for me to make me think, oh man, I was really bummed out with the fact that I dropped this book previously. In fact, I feel like it's a person who like read the cliff notes of the character of Wolverine. It was like, oh, okay, well, if I put these cool things from his past, then like the readers will be happy, right? Well, no, not really, because if you don't have a love and care for those characters and you don't do anything new and interesting with them, I don't know if it's enough to pull me in. And it definitely was not enough to pull me in. It puts a bow on this portion of that storyline, which is great. Maybe he'll move forward and do some new interesting things, but overall, it didn't draw me in any way that made me think, oh, okay, I'm definitely going to pick this up later on. What I can say is that the Daniel Warren Johnson mini story in the back end of this book was absolutely effective. Daniel Warren Johnson is one of the premier creators of any book right here, right now in comics. And to see what he is able to do in a very narrow space of this issue was way more effective than anything that I had read previously in this arc of Wolverine, anything in this issue of Wolverine. And it just makes me long for him taking over the book. Will Marvel do that? Probably not, but I really loved what we were delivered here with this tale of a Wolverine type character in ancient Japan who's basically like almost like a spirit of vengeance, not in a Ghost Rider type of way, but just like a vengeful character, a vengeful samurai out, to seek vengeance for the things, the wrongs that have been done for him in the past. A very classic type of story, but again, if you know Daniel Warren Johnson and his artistic qualities, you know that it's going to be absolutely kinetic, full of force, full of energy. You absolutely get that here. And while the narrative is sparse, it does enough to deliver every idea and notion that you need to push the story forward and gets you to the end place. And it feels, again, while it's not necessarily true Logan like we get in the, traditional Marvel stories, it feels so in tune with the character, and it feels living up to the ideals and the torturous nature that we get from Logan. So Daniel Warren Johnson does a fantastic job on this. If you're going to pick up this issue, that's the reason why. Keep your fingers crossed, man. If he can be on the issue, on the title proper, man, that would be absolutely stunning. Next up, we have Wonder Woman number 20, written by Tom King with artwork by Guillaume March. So we're firmly outside of what we had previously within the pages of the first arc, basically, of Tom King's run. And now we're kind of in this little mini arc. I feel like it's kind of like resetting the table here a little bit as Tom King is going to jump into a new arc. So we got a cool little story here that really involves the Wonder Woman's mother, who is being accused of murdering Ares within the greater pantheon of the Greek gods. And when there's a mystery to be solved, Wonder Woman's going to go to the greatest detective that she absolutely knows, which is going to be Bruce Wayne, better known as Batman. I really like the way that Tom King kind of like plays with the narrative structure between these two characters as they are investigating, the murder, and how Batman has to basically interact with these godly figures and how some of them look kind of highly at him, and they kind of see him like, oh, we understand who you are, we know the stories of the Batman, which is kind of cool to play on the legacy of that character and just how important he is. But you can also see the flip side of that, where some of them have zero respect for that character. I like what Tom King has to say in parts of this book about kind of the notion of Bruce and Bruce's relationship to religion, to godlike figures, and to, I guess, the classical mythological characters as well. There's interesting things that are being played with here. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the approach that's taken in the latter part of the issue. I feel like there's kind of like almost a swift 90-degree turn that takes place that isn't explained fully, but I kind of sort of understand it. Guillaume March's artwork here, it's okay. They really lean heavily into the 9-panel grid on this, and I can't say that it's necessarily done to the most effective way that it possibly could be. The art felt a little bit rushed. It definitely didn't feel as clean as March's artwork has in the past with other titles, but it was okay. It was definitely effective. In regard to kind of the issue itself, I feel like this is a good kind of palate cleanser. This is going to be okay for people who wanted to like kind of jump into Wonder Woman and kind of like not have to worry about the burden of what's happened in the past. This is going to be a good like little mini arc that you can jump into and kind of just see what's up and see if this book is going to be for you. Next up, we have Zatanna #3, written and drawn by Jamal Campbell. There's a lot of good and bad to be kind of discussed with this issue, as I really like a lot of what Jamal Campbell does. Like a lot, a lot. And the previous issues, I feel like the narrative structure was really sound, and I really liked how they were kind of pushing the story forward. This issue, though, from a narrative perspective, felt like the most disjointed and the most muddy, as there was some narrative jumps that take place, both from place to place, from action to action, beat to beat, that were, I don't know, a little bit disjointed. They didn't necessarily make sense, or at least it wasn't as clean as it maybe could be. The artwork kind of follows that same train for the storytelling perspective. Now, Jamal Campbell, when it comes to splash pages, delivers absolutely some of the most stunning splash pages that you can get. The downside is that comics are more than splash pages, right? We learned that from the 90s. It can't all be bombastic fun. There needs to be visual storytelling aspects that are really put to the forefront. And that's where this particular issue kind of struggles. We have Zatanna kind of in this mystical realm here, where she kind of finds out that what's happening is that she's been drawn into this world where Clayface, the character of Clayface, is kind of being manipulated. He's living in this dreamland, essentially, where his family is still alive, where he's living out the dreams of being a Hollywood star, and he's being manipulated this entire time. And Zatanna is the one that pulls him out of that, but pulls him out reluctantly, and causes a big kerfuffle, right? And they get into a fight because of that. And it's kind of playing into the machinations of the other characters, the ones that have put this curse on Zatanna, as they are the same people that are also manipulating Clayface here as well. Again, the artwork is, it's good, but the storytelling of this artwork here doesn't necessarily draw me in the same way that the other issues had. Splash pages are awesome. I think that the way that they convey Clayface and the way that some of those fight scenes happen, there's some really cool stuff here, just not overall. So, what I can say about this is that if you've been reading Zatanna from the first issue, I feel like this still does enough to kind of keep you along for the ride. As a standalone, though, I feel like it's the weakest of the three issues so far. And with my runner up pick of the week, let's talk The New Gods #5, written by Ram V with artwork by Evan Cagle. This was an awesome issue, as I feel like we finally really got, I don't know, like a really heavy, strong focus on every front of this book, as we have basically the war that's being fought between New Genesis and Apocalypse. We have the battle that's taking place between Mr. Miracle and Big Barda and Orion over basically the well-being of this child, the potential new god that has been birthed here. And we also get this great history lesson here and a great meditation on death and sacrifice that is kind of presented in the beginning of this issue with Andrew McLean on artwork, that really pulls forward with light ray throughout the rest of this issue, as there are things that take place that kind of show exactly what's the meaning of death is for a god and what it truly means to return to the source. Really cool ideas that are being played with. But again, I think it's the focus that's being like kind of presented within this issue, because it really gives every part of the story its time to shine. And I think it's the first issue where it's really done that. Everything else has kind of been, heavily focused on one thing or the other. This kind of gives everything its time to shine. And I really, really loved that. The other thing I loved is Evan Cagle's artwork. Oh my God, this might be the best issue that he has drawn. It was just stunning. It was absolutely great, as we get so many really wonderful, heartfelt scenes between, again, the notion of sacrifice, kind of the battles that are taking place. Everything has its moments to shine. The storytelling, the pacing works perfectly. The rendering of these characters looks stunning. It is so great to see through and through. New Gods continues to be one of my favorite books here. I think the narrative structure is sound. It's amazing. The artwork, especially with the way that they're playing with it, with having that the one artist do a couple pages that kind of give like almost a history lesson, and then Cagle taking care of the rest of the story. It's working so well, and I can't wait to see where they continue to take the story as it continues. And with my top comic of the week, let's talk Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 8, written by Jason Aaron with artwork by Juan Ferreira. I know, I'm as shocked as you are. I did not ever anticipate that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would get to the top tier mark here, especially after the initial arc kind of like left such a bad taste in my mouth that I almost didn't want to read these. Wow, this issue does so much to continue pushing forward the story and pushing forward the relationships and character development of our turtles. The bickering and infighting between the brothers is so real, it's palpable. You can cut it with a knife in this issue, and it's so worthwhile. This is very Leonardo centric, as he is struggling with kind of the inner peace that he was trying to find, and he thought that he found being away from his brothers, and how he is not able to force that upon the relationships that he has right now. He's not trying to force it, but he wants it so badly, and he doesn't know how to put it in play. The other brothers have their own individual struggles, and each one of those things gets a spotlight. The other person that is really the primary focus in this issue, though, is Donatello. Donatello is still he's the heart of this book. He's the soul of this book. And seeing the things that he had to go through with his imprisonment, the fighting that needed to take place, the torture that he has gone through, still very clearly has its grips on his psyche, on his mentality, and it's really driven him down to his purest form, the teachings that he's had from Master Splinter, and again, the ideals that he wants to put forward. He's not in the right mindset, but his I don't know, his soul is pure, and it's showing that within the pages of this book, and he wants that so much for his brothers. Each one is struggling with what they want from each other and what they're not getting, and it's just it's great. The other great thing is the artwork. Juan Ferreira, oh my God, it's so dynamic. The artwork here is just, it's free flowing, it's kinetic. The page layouts on here are absolutely stunning, as well, as we basically get the cross section of like a subway scene, as each one of the turtles are fighting off the foot patrol, as they're basically the police state within New York City right now, as they're hunting down every single mutant character, not just the turtles, but every single one that's out there right now. And it really goes to show, really, again, the storytelling, the dynamism, the action set pieces that Juan could put in a book. As long as Juan is drawing this book, I have the feeling that I'm going to be picking this up. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 8 was absolutely worthy of the top comic of the week. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read, and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.